Hello everyone and welcome to the second semi-final of the World Championships 2013. It's Josh Utter-Leyton against Reid Duke. Let's meet the players.
Reid Duke, United States, 52 pro points last season, playing Jund in Standard, playing Hexproof in Modern.
Josh Utter-Leyton, United States, Player of the Year, playing Jund in Standard and Jund in Modern.
So there are the two players, and now you see your Player of the Year, Josh Utter-Leyton, getting ready to rock and roll on the left-hand side of the matchup, and Reid Duke is on the right-hand side of the table, getting ready to go. The 2011 Magic Online Championship winner, taking out Florian Pills, and now an established part of the top tier of Pro Magic.
Very polite of Josh Utter-Leyton there to not point out that he had more pro points than Reid Duke's impressive total last year.
So we're away with a deck for Reid that features all kinds of hexproof. Basically anything that you can't point a sharp stick or gun or pea shooter at, that's what Reid's playing.
We saw probably like a 68 or 67 card mirror last round. This round, we're going to see exactly 6 cards in common. Some Verdant Catacombs, a Misty Rainforest, and a Forest. That's about all these decks have in common with each other.
And just look at all this. You see, it's just loaded all up at once. You see a Keen Sense coming down there to go with Umbra and then the Clay Cover Scout itself. In it comes Josh Utter-Leyton, piles down on the life. You're going to get cards for Reid Duke as a result of the Keen Sense.
Take a look at Hyena Umbra at some point here.
Mm-hmm. And this is a pretty optimal start for Reid, and he even has a really good backup plan, which is he has a Verdant Catacombs in hand, and it can go fetch a Dryad Arbor, which protects him from Josh's Liliana. It just gives you a creature to sacrifice.
Right. It's actually just a spectacular play. We saw that the Elemental combo deck that Jerry Thompson played at Pro Tour Seattle, he said he should have put
Dryad Arbor and green fetches.
And a green fetch land in the deck, so he could deal with that.
So, the first Hall of Famer entering the fray, and that is Dark Confident, the 2-1, Bob Marr Jr., the original, and that will draw extra cards for Josh, each upkeep at the cost of whatever the converted mana cost is on top of his library.
Oh boy.
You were going to say Daybreak Coronet?
Yeah.
That card is such an absolute kicking. I mean, it's incredibly conditional.
Until this deck came along, that card was considered utterly unplayable.
Very fairly.
It really didn't have any room because it requires another aura on the creature, which is not the most common of conditions. But with Hexproof becoming a viable deck and threat, then Daybreak Coronet actually did find a very good home.
Yeah,
it's just like an uber, it's like a Chroma and Unflinching Courage combined together somehow.
Yep, so it goes in. He doesn't even have to bother turning it sideways because as a result of the Daybreak Coronet, as you see, it is vigilant, and that Dark Confident is just getting in the way.
And Josh's hopes dashed by this Verdant Catacombs here is he knows what that represents, and it will make it much harder for him to win this game. If he can wait, he can dismember any potential Dryad Arbor or core Spirit Dancer from Reid, but that requires taking a giant hit off the Coronet, which is not really what he wants to do.
Josh lays land number 3. Down comes Deathrite Shaman, and then Tarmogoyf. And already you see land and creature in the graveyards.
Reid's thinking about his fetch land here.
Yeah, debating whether, because the Dryad Arbor does have summoning sickness because it's a creature. So if he fetches it if he doesn't fetch it now, he won't be able to have it for mana.
So there you see Reid Duke.
He does get the Dryad Arbor. The one thing the Glade Cover Scout is not doing right now is trampling.
No, that's the only ability, probably of every single ability we've ever heard of, that Daybreak Coronet doesn't grant.
Thankfully, we can do something about that at some point, which involves Rancor, +2/+0, and Trample.
Yeah, that is the main avenue to get these creatures trampling. The Reid does also have Unflinching Courages.
Reid untaps.
Now, does he play a core Spirit Dancer here?
I think having more creatures in play to protect from Liliana is just a good plan. I think in general he wants to just have as many creatures out as he can get. This requires Josh to have multiple dismembers on his turn.
Play Daybreak Coronet on this and draw a card. Attack you.
Attack you, says Reid, unsurprisingly.
With his giant 8/8 vigilance, lifelink, first strike.
Yeah.
All sorts of abilities. That also is curious. Would like to draw a card if it hits Josh.
Keenly curious. So now, Josh was hoping to untap, play Liliana the Veil, dismember the Dryad Arbor.
And then eat the Glade Cover Scout with Liliana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Josh, he really needs to draw a dismember, which is why he didn't block with the Tarmogoyf. It looks like he may have actually done that. We'll see in a second.
Certainly there are 2 black cards on the left there.
He doesn't have an untapped land, though. That will cause him no end of problems.
Oh yeah, he does have the.
He has the Death Right. He needs
a 4th land and the Death Right to be.
Yeah, he needs to hit 5 in order to cast 2 Dismembers and Liliana this turn. If that, he does have a Garruk Relentless, and he actually can take a hit off of the Glade Cover Scout here. So just playing Garruk and destroying the core Spirit Dancer seems like a good start. You certainly don't want Reid to untap with that in play, regardless of what your rest of your play is here.
So that's exactly what's happened. So we now have
Yeah, 3
Garruk
hands.
into play.
Reid is actually under a little bit of pressure here. Reid does need to play a good amount of creatures in order to protect from Liliana, and getting Josh low and getting to a very high life is not enough,
He's drawn a Slippery Bogle there.
which is almost exactly what he needed to draw. He needs to basically assemble one more creature than Josh has removal spells for, and Josh doesn't have a giant amount.
We've seen so many different kinds of games here through the World Magic Cup Top 8 and now here in the semi-finals of the World Championship. This is another race where the race is to the number of creatures I can put on the board versus the number of times you can kill a creature.
Yeah, it's very
Without
bizarre.
targeting it.
Yeah, without targeting.
Yeah, and
indeed.
Slippery Bogle is exactly what Reid needed to draw, because that's just another creature with hexproof that really prevents Josh from doing anything but Lilianaing it.
So you can put the second. I think he has a second Keen Sense.
He's got a Spider Umbra, the other 1-mana enchantment, it looks like.
So there's Spirit
Play
Dancer.
Super Umbra on the Spirit Dancer and draw a card.
Yeah, I'm going to draw a card.
Instantly turning Core Spirit Dancer into a 3/5.
Boom.
That can now block flyers.
Of course, Spirit Dancer is one of my favorite cards of all time.
I mean, if you like Verdurn Enchantress, how could you not?
Upgrade. Reid now. We'll send it in. In comes the Glade Cover Scout.
So it's attack you.
You're at 9, I'm at 34.
And Josh is going to take it. 9 to 34.
Now all of Reid's creatures are immune to Garruk, so he doesn't really feel the need to attack it. He'd rather just get Josh as dead as possible.
Puts out the Slippery Bogle.
Though Garruk can actually fight the Dryad Arbor. So Josh is close here. If Reid hadn't drawn the Slippery Bogle, then Josh would actually be able to wipe his board. As is, he can fight Dryad Arbor, dismember.
Keep in mind, he has to pay a lot of life to fight that board, right?
He does. He could dismember the Core Spirit Dancer, and then he's just still one creature away from being able to, achieve what he wants, which is to survive. Josh does have a few turns here, but his board position gets worse and worse every turn.
It looks like the window's closing for Josh Utter-Leyton here in Game 1. And that sort of stack of 5, remember, on the right-hand side of your screen, that's just one creature with 4 creature
Right,
enchantments on it.
That's not a fact or fiction resolving.
No.
No, quite. Or a duress.
There are some interesting ways to split that if that were a fact or fiction.
How you can stop it, the pair of you.
Twitter homework.
Yeah.
You've had your blue, white, red mirror fun.
Yeah.
You're just happy because everyone's casting stuff main phase here, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this uses the only step that the blue, white, red mirror didn't, which is the attack step.
Josh is just trying to figure out exactly what he needs to do here.
And this is something you'll notice too. Josh, he isn't the fastest player. He doesn't play as fast as Ben, for example. But when a player takes a long time on a decision, it's usually because none of their options are good. Usually you can identify when your options are good and just be like, all right, I'll do this. But when you have all bad options, then you're just like, which one do I do?
Which seems like a little bit the opposite of one of the characteristics of Ben, just going back to where he'll quickly run through those permutations and then go, oh, all right, good game, move on.
Ben is not unwilling to do things that he doesn't like in a game of Magic. Like he's not. It doesn't seem like it affects him quite the same way other people do.
Okay.
Dismember.
And despite Umbra's offering some level of protection, Dismember does get around them. It doesn't deal lethal damage.
And now away goes Dryad Arbor.
If the Coronet didn't give first strike, Garrick could actually assemble a Death Touch blocker.
There's Liliana. That was a lot of creatures hitting the bin right there.
And both players were very aware of this sub-game.
Mm-hmm. Reid is back down to 1. He's drawn a slippery bogle.
A slippery little guy. He's getting Reid out of all these situations, and I think that will put the final nail in Josh's coffin here.
Uses a Horizon Canopy to draw a card, and he finds Rancor.
Oh, well, there we go.
Boom. We said the only thing missing was what it's no longer missing. Just these 6 cards all in a pile to make it 1-0 to Reid Duke.
And Horizon Canopy is one of the reasons Reid really likes that deck, by the way. He says it stops it from getting flooded because the deck really only needs 2 to 3 lands in play.
Right, yeah, he does not. It's like an Enchantress deck, right? It doesn't operate on a lot of mana. It really just puts all its eggs in this bulletproof basket.
Yeah.
And, proceeds to get into the red zone.
Josh does not look pleased. I think he feels like Reid, probably drew that boggle the turn before, Josh was going to actually get the board clear, so.
His deck cruelly gave him hope.
Yeah, he knew how close that game was. An untapped land would have done it as well the turn prior.
And it's so funny to say that, right? Because at the end of that game, Reid is somewhere in the high 40s in life while Josh is dead. But the game actually was very close.
So on your screens right now, you have Josh Utter-Leyton's sideboard. The Big Four. That's a card that he's really wanted to see in a variety of matchups. Sacrifice Full-Minded Mage to destroy target non-basic land. A couple of Shadow of Doubt left over from the first semi-final. Wrench Mind, Throne the Last Troll, Infest, Deathmark, and Phyrexian Arena, one of my favorite cards ever. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. What are they going to do with the sideboards?
Well, Josh hopes he gets to side in the 4 Fulminator Mages, because that means he's in the finals. Otherwise, those things probably not doing a whole lot of work here.
Sure.
I mean, it might be that he's got enough dead targeted removal that he doesn't want them, but I would be surprised if he wanted much more than the Infests and maybe the Death Marks, even though they can't kill hexproof creatures, can't kill a Giant Spirit Dancer. Not through an Umbra, unfortunately. And Thrun is an effective ground blocker, but once you hit Rancor and Daybreak Coronet, it's actually just completely outclassed. So that leaves Josh with mostly hoping Reid doesn't draw Leyline and Josh does draw Liliana.
Do you get greedy and try to snipe a land with Shadow of Doubt?
I don't think you can afford to do that. You're going to have to tap out over and over again. I mean, Josh really needs to get a ton of creatures into play and kill Reid before Reid assembles his combo.
Even in that situation where Shadow of Doubt suddenly kills a Dryad Arbor?
That is a pretty good use for it. I could see that being good, especially since Reid does need to, or having somewhat incentive to keep his fetch lands uncracked. But I still think Shadow of Doubt probably costs enough mana that, Josh might bring it in, but it seems borderline at the very least.
Right, and I mean, one of the other just arguments, not that I'm posting a very strong argument for it, but Shadow of Doubt doesn't target.
No, it is untargeted.
Yeah, but if Leyline of Sanctities go in play, then it won't really matter if you can do anything about that Dryad Arbor because most of Josh's deck gets shut off. Yeah,
Josh does have 2 Maelstrom Pulses that can kill Leyline of Sanctity, but past that, he can't interact with it very well.
What about Reid Duke then? He's got these 4 Leyline of Sanctities that he can bring in that says you can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Singleton, Grafdigger's Cage, couple of Rest in Peace, Stony Silence, couple of Dismember for him, 2 for Path to Exile, and a Suppression Field.
When he played Josh in the Swiss, he brought in Leyline of Sanctity. It didn't actually come into play, really. I think he may have actually cast it very late in the game. But the card that was a huge all-star for him in that matchup was Rest in Peace.
Yeah, and that's an interesting use for the card because it's not necessarily meant for these matchups to begin with, but as people went through the season of the last Modern season especially, they found out that the deck that has both Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman gets shut down very, very effectively by Rest in Peace.
And Scavenging Ooze.
And now we have Scavenging Ooze, which is another reason to rest in peace.
Yeah, the card has actually been super MVP sideboard card for Reid, who has it for very specific matchups, but even brought it in against Shahar in the red, white, blue matchup, and it was fantastic for him.
Yeah, just shutting off Flashback and Snapcasters mostly.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely what it did.
So yeah, it's a powerful enough card that even if it isn't trading directly for other cards, it still does enough damage to them that it's worth it, especially for only 2 mana.
Right, so many decks rely on having access to their graveyard or having resources in their graveyard, and it's one of the things that Reid Duke's deck just doesn't care about at all. So it's,
Yeah, and it's not a card you'd want 3 or 4 of, but 2 is kind of the perfect number.
So there you see the sideboards, but of course we can theorize all we want. They're actually doing it down there on the floor, and we've got Sheldon Menery down there taking a sneaky look inside deck boxes. And what we're hearing, this is an interesting one. It sounds like a couple of Infest going in for Josh Utter-Leyton. It also sounds like he may have brought in the one for Ixion Arena. There by the sound of things. Now Reid has got rid of 4 Spider Umbra. They've come out. A couple of core Spirit Dancers have gone because of course he's got to make room for. He's got plenty of stuff he wants to make room for. So it looks like you won't be seeing Spider Umbra again. And that core Spirit Dancer constantly getting +2/+2 for each aura. That's all well and good, but that's the bit of the hexproof deck that isn't proof.
Yeah, I mean, it is against a deck that where Josh is leaving in a fair amount of removal just because he doesn't really have a choice. Having extra guys that can be targeted, maybe not your best plan, especially when you're bringing in very good sideboard cards.
So Josh,
although it's hard to not get a little bit of value out of Core Spirit Dancer. You play it, you don't yield priority, and then you put an aura on a hexproof guy. Because it's Core Spirit Dancer says when you cast it. When you cast an aura, you can't actually stop them from drawing a card.
Yeah, that's a line of play Reid said he did a number of times during the tournament.
So you hear the distinctive clack of the cards. I'll play, says Josh. Okay, good plan.
Is there a Leyline of Sanctity in his opening hand?
There's a Rest in Peace, but as for a Leyline, I'm not sure.
No, doesn't look like it. There's a Glade Cover Scout, double Keen Sense, Temple Garden.
This actually looks like a kind of borderline hand. If Reid can't enchant his Glade Cover Scout and doesn't have a Leyline, it's not one of his premium hands for sure. I mean, he can give it some Keen Senses, but you're really looking for an Ethereal Armor most of all.
When you're against someone who is playing potentially ley lines, do you have to look at your opening hand twice and you see it as this is if he doesn't have a ley line, here's my 7. This is if he goes plunk, this is my 7. Do you sort of examine them through 2 lenses?
You do have to keep that in mind. The problem is that Josh's cards that get shut down by Leyline are also his most important cards when Reid doesn't have Leyline. It's really going to be tough. Like a hand of Thoughtseize Inquisition, Liliana, Tarmogoyf, and lands. Leyline really shuts that hand down. I still don't think Josh can mulligan that.
And it looks like, yeah, Reid is having a real thought about that. And as you said, Luis, there's this Glade Cover Scout and obviously plenty of enchantments to stick on it.
But unfortunately, not the ones that really make it powerful.
No enhancers.
Yeah, Curiosity is all well and good. Keen Sense is the card you want to go along with something like an Ethereal Armor. But without an actual power booster, you might actually be stuck watching your opponent just play more and more creatures.
We saw a handful of Tarmogoyfs for Josh Utter-Leyton, so he's going to open on an Inquisition. Because probably take that Rest in Peace.
Yeah, the Rest in Peace looks like the biggest threat from what we saw there.
Able to follow up with a 2/3 Tarmogoyf a turn later.
Yeah, and enchantments in the graveyard, are something that happened against the the hexproof deck more often than against most, but still is good to start on turn 1 with an enchantment in the bin.
And interesting also, even by mulliganing, if Reid hits a Leyline of Sanctity, he double mulligans Josh.
Yeah, he gets way back into it just by hitting a Leyline. So that does factor into your mulligan decisions. And knowing, like when you're mulliganing, I mean, Dredge is the extreme choice. If you have Leyline of the Void against a Dredge deck, that's so good that shuts down the whole deck that you often will just mulligan even if you don't have it, no matter how good your hand is. We're not quite at that point here, but we're still at the point where, Reid having 4 Leylines that give him a huge edge are something he considers when looking at whether he wants to mulligan.
That problem that Reid faced there with, yes, I have enchantments, yes, my deck is about enchantments sticking on the thing, but it's not the right ones, is something that at a much lower power level, we're all kind of going through at the moment as we try and evaluate slivers within M14, because they're things that, you know, you get a whole bunch of them together and they're fantastic, and you slam down your rare Megantic sliver and everything's utterly marvelous. But then you see an opening hand that gives you maybe 3 slivers and you go, yeah, okay, or maybe I'm going to have a couple of 2-3s that...
That sounds awesome.
Well,
I would love to have a 2-3 in limited. I do think that in limited, you're less likely to have the luxury of mulliganing like that.
You don't have the redundancy in your deck to know that there's this percentage chance that's reasonable that this card will be in my hand.
Like, if you were to look at the win percentages from mulligans to 4 or 5 in constructed, I think they'd be much higher than in limited.
message from Paul Reitzel on Twitter. I like to keep there, but Billy Jensen said mulligan. If you're debating at home, you now have your answer. So now we're looking at 6. The Rest in Peace is back again. Core Spirit Dance, remember he took 2 of those out, is there again. Looks like it might be a Keen Sense as we just close in. You see a Razor Verge Thicket.
Actually,
It's a which?
I think it's a Ranker.
Ah, okay.
Actually looks like a Dryad Arbor
yeah.
of all cards.
And that's why we bring Luis in the booth, so we can both be wrong, but we still get it right.
Well, this is also not a great hand. Rest in Peace is another combo with Core Spirit Dancer if it does hit off enchantments, not just auras. But still, this is not really the hand Reid's looking for. It might be worth keeping on 6, but if Reid throws it back, I wouldn't be one to doubt him.
How explosive a 5 can he look to here? If he's imagining putting this away, what can he imagine being left with?
I mean, his optimal 5 is like 2 lands, a 1-drop hexproof creature, and then 2 auras. And that's not a hard hand to achieve. He's got a lot of redundancy, like VDM was saying.
And the weird thing now is he's also hitting a point where he draws his hand, and if there's a Leyline of Sanctity in there, while it's still good, it means his 5-card hand here will be a 4-card hand.
Yeah, he could easily end up with Leyline, 2 enchantments, a 1-drop, and maybe like no land. And that might be a keepable hand. I mean, I would not be shocked if Reid kept that, especially on the draw.
When you're designing decks or playtesting decks, Luis, how much do you spend time actually thinking about the mulliganability of, which is not a word, by the way, boys and girls.
I know exactly what you're saying, though. It does matter. That matters for the overall consistency of the deck.
Well, I mean, you just saw that with like the Cawblade deck in general, right? Like that was such a good. That deck was so good at mulliganing.
Yeah, and the fact that you could mulligan into just 2 lands and a Stoneforge Mystic and still win the game from there meant that Ben going into the top 8 of Pro Tour Paris, he was prepared to mulligan hands that didn't have Stoneforge Mystic almost universally. In the mirror specifically, because the mirror was so much about the card.
By the way, people at home could take shuffling lessons from Reid Duke.
But not Josh Utter-Leyton. Please,
No.
not Josh Utter-Leyton. my first experience with Josh actually was at a PTQ. He was playing my roommate, and I'm like, well, this guy can't be good. He doesn't know how to shuffle. He's clearly never picked up cards before. And turns out Josh is very good.
So Reid is now looking at 5. Unflinching Courage, 2 land,
That Rest in Peace will not go away.
Yeah,
Hyena Umbra, and Rest in Peace, which does large amounts of nothing.
And Reid, again, aggressively mulliganing here, which is one feature of the deck. And also the fact that he is mulligan to 4 also shows another side of the deck, not so pretty side, which sometimes the deck does, self-destruct. And that's true in the standard version as well. It's incredibly powerful when it works, nigh unbeatable. But it is the type of deck that if you don't have specific cards at the specific times, you're often forced to mulligan to 4 or risk doing nothing the entire game.
And Reid has run pretty good with this deck thus far, so.
I certainly don't think he would be complaining.
Yeah, he's done absolutely fine so far. He finds himself one very tough opponent away from a World Championship final against Shahar Shenhar. If you're just joining us, because we know plenty of you are all over the world, 6 o'clock here in Amsterdam, 5 o'clock back home for me in the UK. Big shout out, well done England and Scotland getting into day 2. Couldn't get it any further, but well done for that. And of course to Ireland, congratulations to them, one of the great Irish teams. In fact, the greatest Irish team we've had. Reid will now look at 1, 2, 3, 4.
This looks more keepable than most of his hands.
I mean, it's a land and a Glade Cover Scout.
as well as an unflinching courage, and it looks like maybe a slippery boggle. So he's kind of got the pieces there. He has to draw a combination of one drops and auras, but the fact that he's about to get Inquisition is...
He doesn't know that he actually started this on 2 cards.
Yeah, I'm not going to say Reid didn't expect Inquisition, but, you know, it's happening.
So Josh takes a little look at that lot. He now has perfect information. It's not going to take him long to write that hand down. Choose a non-land card, converted mana cost 3 or less, and the player discards that card.
And one thing, you know, to Reid's advantage here is that he does have 2 copies of the one drop. So even though Josh does take one, Reid is going to be able to lead with one. And the second Inquisition is unable to stop that. And he even drew the Ethereal Armor. So, this, I mean, things are looking up. As far as they can when you mulligan to 4 and got Inquisition.
Yes, and when he said looking up, he's looking up at this towering cliff of doom, which he has to scale somehow. But yes, things are getting better. Tarmogoyf, turn 2 from Josh Utter-Leyton, and already plenty of fuel for that in the graveyard. You see a land, you see the Inquisition, you see creature. So that Tarmogoyf's already pretty big. Reid will sleeve up the Slippery Bogle. It's Ethereal Armor. +1/+1, remember, and first strike for each enchantment that it gets on it. There you see that in all its glory.
And not the card, you know, that I necessarily thought would make the most impact in Constructed, but as it turns out, it's delivered a lot of lethal hits.
It took a while for people to understand that it was a thing in Limited. I mean, initially, you look at that like, who wants one of those? And it turns out no one wants one of them. They want 4 of them.
There goes the unflinching courage to another Inquisition of Code's Luck.
Daybreak Coronet is what Reid's hoping for here.
Tarmogoyf is already a 4/5.
And just because he didn't slam it doesn't mean he doesn't draw it. Reid is a very deliberate player, so I would not be surprised if he drew it and considered his options. Of course, by not attacking it, it does kind of indicate he did not draw that.
What card is that there?
Looks like a Dryad Arbor. Josh getting a little punished by his Tectonic Edges here. He would love to have another Tarmogoyf in play, but unfortunately not an option off double Tectonic Edge.
Reid conveniently put it up front where it could be dismembered.
Yeah. It is tough when you have Horizon Canopy and you need spells, but you also only have 2 lands in play. You don't really have the option of cycling it without going down to 1 land, which may be worth it if you really need to hit another Ethereal Armor or a Rancor, but it cuts off the Daybreak Coronet draw, which is so good that I imagine Reid, you know, just wants to keep his lands in play.
Deathrite Shaman now from Josh Utter-Leyton.
And now
Josh has Hellbent. Hellbent, of course,
Hellbent, yeah.
being the guild keyword from Dissension there, which does most of its work in describing someone with no cards in hand rather than having gameplay effect. But it is shorter than saying no cards in hand.
We made it rather longer.
Well, I mean, the thing, once you get that explanation done, you don't have to say it again.
Yeah, that's true. And here we go.
He's drawn Leyline of Sanctity.
Maybe not at the right time.
Pass the turn.
This, I don't think, is going to be very easy for Reid to win. Josh can crash in with both Goyfs, and because of the Deathrite Shaman, force Reid to chump block. From that position, I don't know what Reid can draw to get himself out of this.
No.
Not that Reid is going to concede. I've never seen Reid concede a game until he's taken lethal damage or had drawn a card with no cards in his library.
Thinking.
Draws. Draws again. Thank you. So Reid Duke packs them in, and basically Josh Utter-Leyton sat there and went, okay then, even better okay then, really okay then. And then he went, thanks for playing. So that was the summary of Game 2. We don't promise you here that every single game of Magic we show you will be a classic, but we've sure shown you plenty of them today. So I hope you can appreciate 5 minutes of kind of not so hot Magic.
Well, I'm pretty sure that would not have played out much better for Reid on his 7-card hand.
No, especially not with the Inquisition turn 1 taking his only threat.
And again, I think he has to know that, you know, those are the kind of hands that Josh wants to be keeping here.
Yeah, Josh with 6 1-drop discard spells, it's not going to have very many hands that don't have them, especially when he didn't mulligan.
we've seen in Reid Duke's deck, he plays one creature and then puts tons of things on it to give it a lot of different abilities, essentially. Well, Josh, on the other side, has a creature that's got a ton of abilities just built into the card. Why don't we take a little look at Deathrite Shaman, one of the real hits of recent years, as the players continue to do their thing and re-prepare for Game 3. Deathrite Shaman PDM, a card that I remember you identifying very quickly as a real powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a card that nobody, people playing Modern talk about not wanting to play a deck that doesn't have access to 4 Deathrite Shamans.
It is a very powerful, like, format-defining card. The fact that it costs green or black gives black something it's never had before, which is essentially a Birds of Paradise.
Yeah, and has it gotten any worse because of Scavenging Ooze? Has it gotten a little dicey to use, or is it, or does Modern operate on such a tight mana window that they can never actually?
It's kind of strange because, yes, the card Scavenging Ooze does fight against the card Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman doesn't want to see an opposing Scavenging Ooze. But often the decks that play Deathrite Shaman are also interested in Scavenging Ooze. So in a way, it actually makes Deathrite Shaman better because that same deck will want to play both cards.
Interesting that one of the most powerful aspects of this card, removing cards from any graveyard, was not the original intent of this card's design, and that was something that was added pretty late in development. And I think that's what's just made this card so tremendous.
Yeah, it turns it from just, a very good card, which it already still would have been, to a card that can also disrupt your opponent. It's kind of free disruption. It's like you have Deathrite Shaman, and it makes their Snapcasters a little worse. It makes maybe a Junk Reanimator deck a little worse. It makes other decks worse without you really giving up anything, because you're still playing it as a 1/2 that taps for any color of mana, especially in Modern.
And it can block an unenchanted Slippery Boggle.
Yeah, that's one of its secret special abilities.
But a Keen Scent Slippery Boggle.
Yeah, it does. It is a 1-drop creature, and the fact that in Legacy, say, it can block like a Goblin Lackey is not irrelevant. And in fact, it's also, a player in Legacy. It's, as we see there, it's 4 Legacy Grand Prix top 8 decks, and it's kind of powering other blue decks as well as Jund decks. So it's doing double duty there.
So that's your Deathrite Shaman. As we say goodbye to return to Ravnica Block, we're knee-deep in M14. Still got a couple months before we go to the heroic world of Theros. I kept having to scrub out sort of Herculean references in my preview for this video. If I'm going to need those soon, I'll be in those in Dublin in October.
Paul Rietzel asking if I've never seen Reid get poisoned. I said I've never seen Reid concede except to lethal damage or having no cards in deck. But
not the full trifecta.
I suppose I actually haven't seen Reid get poisoned to death. And if you just tuned in, that does sound a little grim. We're talking about the infect creature.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, for those of you who've started since Scars of Mirrodin, there was once a time. Anyway, we're getting ready for Game 3. It's now down to the best of 3, because overall, it is the best of 5 here in the top 4 of the World Championship. Shahar Shenhar awaits the winner of Reid Duke and Josh Utter-Leyton.
I feel like this is the least verbal match we've seen all weekend.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Reid is pretty much all business. Same with Josh, and they both just like to focus on their games. Whereas I'd have a hard time describing Ben as all business, which is one of the things that makes me like him so much. I too would not describe myself as all business.
Business casual.
Yeah, business casual is.
You see Josh mulliganing his hand. Reid has kept. It didn't look like he had a hexproof creature in his hand, but it did look like he had Core Spirit Dancer and a number of auras.
Yeah, as well as potentially a Leyline, which is, I'm not sure if we caught a glimpse of that or not.
I don't think I saw Leyline.
Okay, but even if he didn't have the Leyline or the 1-drop hexproof creature, having a Core Spirit Dancer and a number of Umbras or Auras or some combination should be enough to kind of give him a good start. It's not necessarily a race against Josh. When Josh draws double Tarmogoyf, it is. But in a lot of ways, Reid's the one looking to assemble a bunch of pieces, and Josh can't really stop him once he does. Josh is kind of suffering from the fact that Hexproof is not as popular a deck in Modern as it is in Standard. So where a Modern Jund deck or a Standard Jund deck would have multiple Barter and Bloods just for this eventuality, in Modern you can't really afford to play such a narrow sideboard card.
Although, could you, if you if you got a wind of the fact that Reid Duke was going to be playing this deck at some point before the tournament, could you make an adjustment to your sideboard? Is it worth it in this kind of like weird small field of 16 players? You know, if you're like, well, I don't think anyone else is prepared for this deck, which has been the case.
Yeah, I mean, besides, with the exception of Ben, who's no longer in the tournament, not many people had a good answer to Reid's deck. And I think if you saw Reid, drop a hexproof deck on the way to the venue and had enough time to change your sideboard, I think you would actually put in some Barter Bloods. Well,
so we're underway. Josh has mulligan to 6, but kept at that point. Slippery Bogle is into play for Reid Duke, as we see Josh crack his first land of the game.
And he did have the 1-drop hexproof creature there.
those slippery bogles.
Yeah, it's just hiding behind an aura.
And Josh has a play. It is Thoughtseize.
Starts the game at 17.
And we get a look at Reid's hand. There's a Daybreak Coronet there, Core Spirit Dancer.
Oh. What
Couple of
he
land.
actually doesn't have is a lot of auras that he can cast.
Yeah, he's got the 2, and if Josh wants to, he can take the Unflinching Courage, stranding the Daybreak Coronet in hand. It's tough because Daybreak Coronet is much more powerful, but it is also more vulnerable to being the only aura. So if he takes the Unflinching Courage and Reid immediately draws a 1-drop or 2-drop aura, Josh could be in trouble.
You don't want to take the Core Spirit, which is... He'll take the Core Spirit Dance.
No, I think that's a perfectly reasonable option too, but you could take the line of trying to just strand Daybreak Coronet there, and that wouldn't have worked out so well since Reid actually just drew a Rancor.
And that's a pretty greedy line, would you say?
Yeah, I think that Josh doesn't need to go to quite that extreme to do that.
So the Slippery Bogle, now auraed up with Rancor, pops in for 3. As Josh draws, it's a land.
So this is the race to Liliana here, right?
It is, and Reid again does have the fetch line for a Dryad Arbor, though Josh has a nice little Wrench Mind in store.
Card he brought in from his sideboard.
Yeah, and I think it's actually reasonably effective here. It's mostly for control matchups, but being able to reduce Reid's hand size, especially when Reid plays a lot of cards in the first couple turns, could hurt Reid, especially when Reid's trying to cast Unflinching Courage. Being able to keep a 3-mana spell and 3 lands is going to be a real challenge.
I mean, Reid's deck is really a combo deck that's looking to have a critical mass of things happen.
So Josh does have an out here to Reid, maybe just keeping the Daybreak Coronet, discarding the other 2, then having to crack his fetch land for white to cast Coronet, and then giving Josh an out to Liliana the Slippery Bogle. So Reid's certainly thinking about all that as well. The question is 3 a turn enough? It might not be.
We mentioned that Wrench Mind is out of the sideboard for Josh Utter-Leyton. I can confirm from our team on the floor, Sheldon Menery down there, keeping an eye on things for us all, that neither player changed their sideboard plans at all. So not a matchup then where players think, well, I'm on the play, so I'm going to take these out. Oh, I'm on the draw. I must change this round.
I don't think either player has the luxury or desire to do that. Josh doesn't have a huge wealth of sideboard cards for this matchup, and Reid has a lot of sideboard cards, but they're all so good that he's just going to want them in play or draw.
Yeah, we see Josh had to go a little deep even on
the Wrench Minds. Yeah. But it's being effective here. I mean, it's stopping Reid. Without knowing the top of his deck, he can't necessarily have a Daybreak Coronet and a Dryad Arbor in play at the same time this next turn.
And it's safe to say you always want to give your opponent tough decisions to make.
Yes. So it looks like Reid did just keep the Daybreak Coronet there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess decide whether he wants to go for it. He really would just like to draw a land here that taps for white.
Let's see.
I believe he did.
Both players flicking around, and then Reid, in what is becoming a very typical Reid Duke pose, he does the little flick, and then, now I'm going to put them down, so I can't do anything with them. I'm going to steeple my hands together.
I'm going to put them where they can do no harm.
Yeah.
Not in my hands.
Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm.
It looks
like Keen Sense for Reid. So the safe play is certainly just Keen Sense, attack for 3, draw your card, hope to draw a land off that. If he goes for the Daybreak Coronet plan here, it will not work out so well. Reid strikes me as a guy who will take the somewhat more conservative route.
He'll have the keen sense to just go with the green enchantment.
He will.
Attack you for 3.
Josh can force Reid to play the Coronet by playing a Tarmogoyf here if he's able to, and then if Reid wants to attack, he has to play the Daybreak Coronet, which will open Reid up to a potential Liliana the Veil. Liliana's one of the most impactful cards in the matchup. Josh has 4 of them. It's hard for Reid not to play around it if he's able to.
And again, Josh mulligan, so obviously he's looking for certain cards when he mulligans.
Yes. Liliana being, I would say, the primary one. Reid does have answers to it, the Dryad Arbor being the most prevalent, but Josh still has ways to kill Dryad Arbor.
Interesting comment from Matt Nass on Twitter, obviously watching in avidly as friends do battle. Reid should know Josh has Liliana and no removal because he took Core Spirit Dancer. Shouldn't go for the Coronet play.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Matt Nass knows his combo decks.
Yeah, indeed. If this was green-red aggro, I wouldn't have read it out.
Yeah, of course not.
If it's a combo deck with 1-drop green creatures, Matt knows what's going on.
Yeah, I would say so. So Reid's still looking for that white-producing land here.
It's going to take me to 15.
Well, he's giving up on the Dryad Arbor plan, but if he drew the Core Spirit Dancer here, that looks like his play. If not, he might just be going for the Coronet. The fact that he gets to draw an extra card immediately, it does provide a hedge. It lets you rebuild.
He could also Coronet and hope to trample over, draw a card, and hit another fetch land.
Yeah, drawing a fetch land is key here.
It's a little slim.
Yeah, I don't think Josh ends up blocking, is my guess.
Coronet is in. That's 1-1, 3-1, 3-1, draw a card, 6-4, I think, yep. So Josh is at 5. Reid goes to 21. He draws a card.
It's a land. It has an ability. It's not a fetch land.
It's got another Daybreak Coronet in hand, as you see, and that Core Spirit Dancer.
So there's a pretty big life total discrepancy here, but Josh is going to be able to solve that pretty soon with Liliana of the Veil coming down to devour a Slippery Bogle.
So here we go.
Well, it's almost like Josh can't believe it. He's actually going to get to Liliana, a triple enchanted creature.
And this, boys and girls, is what we call in the trade a 4 for none. Or 3.5 if you want to quibble about the Rancor coming back.
Core Spirit Dancer does let Reid rebuild. Core Spirit Dancer, Rancor it up, next turn Daybreak Coronet. Though I think Garruk, if Josh has a Garruk Relentless, I don't think he's going to let Reid get to that point.
He's drawn another Daybreak Coronet. So down comes Core Spirit Dancer.
At 16. Rancor, Spirit Dancer, and draw a card. Sure.
So he gets the card back from the Core Spirit Dancer.
Though actually, once it's enchanted, it becomes a 2/4. So yeah, Garruk actually can't even touch it. Core Spirit Dancer, in fact, getting giant.
Josh Utter-Leyton got his Planeswalker into play, got that huge edge by getting rid of Slippery Bogle with any number of enchantments on it.
Yet still in a tough spot here.
Yeah.
He needs another removal spell and does not have one forthcoming.
And this is the point of the game where Reid is able to just start drawing a lot of cards. And
Yeah, if Reid gets to untap with Core Spirit Dancer in play, he kind of gets to go off. He gets to play 2 enchantments, draw 2 cards, attack for a pretty significant amount of damage, maybe even lethal once they all come down.
Josh goes to 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it very likely is lethal.
The
Yeah.
Daybreak Coronet, it gives +5/+5
Essentially, yeah.
to the Core Spirit Dancer.
Here is Garruk. 3. Josh runs out the token.
Josh has a lot of toughness in play here, but not quite enough to hold off against a Daybreak Coronet plus an Ethereal Armor, which gives an additional, at that point, another +5/+5. So we're talking about 14 power creature here. Something along those lines.
That looked like Leyline of Sanctity turning up at the wrong time again, but this is the wrong time that he doesn't care about as much.
Yeah, I think he's going to be okay here.
So, mana number 1, Ethereal Armor, my guy, I'll draw a card. Core Spirit Dancer means it gets +2/+2, so that's a net +3/+3. But another one for the Ethereal Armor because of the Rancor, so that's +4/+4. Keeping track? What's next for Reid?
Already getting +4, +2 from
The Rancor.
the Ranker.
8, 8, 10, 14. Yeah, because it gets quite a bit of boost from a bunch of different directions here. So rechecking if he's actually got lethal.
Josh is at 4. He's got a Tarmogoyf, which, of course, because Reid is playing, if you like, a fairly unusual set of sort of types, has enchantments in the graveyard.
Does he have to attack Liliana here?
I think so. If it looks like if Reid plays Daybreak Coronet, it looks like he might be able to trample over for lethal here.
Josh has to muster potentially 10.
14.
Josh has to muster 11 points of defense against a 14 power creature, and looks like Reid might be getting close to that.
Ranker again. Draw a card.
If Reid, let's see, so it looks like Reid didn't quite get to the number he needed, so he's going to just choose to attack Liliana, which will kill it.
13.
So it looks like Josh has enough toughness that he maybe couldn't have survived a 13-point attack. If it's sorcery, creature, land, enchantment, 4/5 Goyf, plus 2 toughness creatures, 9, plus his life total is 13. So if Reid's hitting for 13, he may have been able to kill Josh, though it looks like Josh is likely to die on this upcoming turn unless he draws another Liliana.
Let's see what he does draw. No.
It could be a Liliana.
I mean-
you can't tell with Josh.
Oh, that's true. I'll give you that.
He's not much of a slam this card down on the table kind of guy.
No, not so much.
I'm sorry.
Oh. That's right.
You just tend to think it must be vigilant. It's everything else.
See, this time it tramples, doesn't have vigilance.
Josh drawing a Dark Confidant, it looks like, which not really high in his list of cards to draw.
Dark, not so confident. No. There we go. But he's going to play it. He's going to just muster as much toughness as possible. First guy in the queue.
Yeah, the calculations here are not so complicated. Reid was pretty close last turn. This turn, he's just going to be able to slam his Daybreak Coronets and get in there. Looks like Razorverge Thicket might actually come into play tapped, which is kind of a rarity in this matchup, or in this deck even.
Reid taking his time.
You got to double, triple check,
He has
you know.
plus 19. I think he has plus 19 power if he plays the Coronet.
Yeah, it looks
Did you
like
just say the words plus 19 power? I love this deck so much.
all right. We're almost beyond the realm of counting here.
Are we going for
That's
the
plus
well-known tech
23.
lots?
Block with everything.
Block with everything.
Okay, time to order a blocker.
He could be a little pyramid
Like that.
in the red zone.
Does
There we are.
I guess Josh can gain a little life here.
9, 10,
He can.
13, 23. I think you're going to 5, 6.
Yeah.
So I'll sign
So 23.
6, plus 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13, and 10 to you.
Thank you for playing.
That was close at least.
I was dead on board the previous turn, right? I didn't discount. 13 power, 9 toughness.
Now that's interesting. Now, are we... Okay, perhaps I should talk to BDM for a moment. I'm actually going to leave you out of this conversation for a moment, because I think whatever answer you'd want to give, maybe you can't give it.
Fair enough.
Now, I've just seen a thing there where where player A, let's take people out of it for a minute, says to player B, wasn't I dead the previous turn? I was at 9, you could deal me 13, so that would have done it. Now, is that I'm just having a chat with an equal, or am I actively trying to tell you that you're dumb? And I don't mean that, is there gameplay going on in that conversation?
I don't know the gameplay. There's certainly a little bit of emotion, I think. I mean, it sounded a little, Like, I had another turn. I didn't get what I needed. I couldn't get the dramatic rip of my Leon. He sounded maybe a little angry, but I don't know. Luis?
I don't think Josh is looking for an edge later in the match. It's not like a mind game.
Okay.
I would be willing to guess that he is a little frustrated maybe, and that's like, come on, you could have just killed me last turn, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, I do think that Reid did have Josh dead on the previous turn, so.
Yeah. There's no doubt that amongst all these incredible gifts that the enchantments bestow, one of the fabulous keywords, and it's been true throughout Magic history, is trample. And for that, yes, there's unflinching courage. But before that, there was this little guy, Rancor. Let's take a look at the green mana that just keeps on coming back. BDM, talk to us about this, because this has been a great card forever.
I don't know what else is in the pack, but I would like to take this card.
Yeah, Rancor is, as we saw earlier in the World Magic Cup, a pretty good threat against control when you're playing it in kind of fair way. In decks like this Hexproof deck in Modern and in Standard is also not a very fair way to play it. You just put it on a guy, Core Spirit Dancer gets +4/+2, and you draw a card. You put it on a Hexproof guy along with Ethereal Armor, and then you end up being, a giant unblockable for a striking Trampler.
If you want to do something fun with this deck, throw an Auramancer in here, which is legal from the time-shifted sheet in Modern, and then you can play your Rancor, draw a card, sack it to Auramancer, give it +2/+2.
Oh, Oratog.
Oratog, sorry.
Right, okay.
Oratog.
Oratog's legal also in M14s. But yeah, Oratog Rancor, that used to be a deck quite some time ago.
Yeah. I played a lot of that deck. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and Rancor, I remember playing with it limited in the original time it was printed in Legacy, and it was very strong in that set as well.
Oh yeah, it was just a first pick card all the time, right? It was just phenomenal.
Back then it was actually common, right?
The last line there, I remember going out to Wizards, and sometimes you overhear stuff that maybe you're not supposed to overhear, and there were people playing Infect decks with Rancor, and it was very crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, the Infect deck in Modern does play Rancor, and for a very good reason.
Rancor is one of my favorite cards because it features in my only cool Pro Tour lifetime cool play that I made. It's my very first match on the Pro Tour. I'm 1-0 up against my round one opponent, and he has Rancor on a guy. And my clever friends, the ones who actually do understand how to play Magic, know that when Rancor goes to the graveyard, there's this trigger. And if you sideboard in Phyrexian Furnace, you can get rid of Rancor with the trigger on the stack. And I felt really smug when I did that to him. And I won my first ever Pro Tour match as a result. And that's the only cool play I've ever made at the PT. Rancor, no, I don't think that's coming back. Hooray for Phyrexian Furnace.
Phyrexian Furnace is also one of my favorite cards.
Yeah, it's the original Relica Progenitus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. Was that from Weatherlight, Phyrexian Furnace, back in the... it might be somewhere around there.
I believe it was Weatherlight, yes.
Gerard and friends. Well, right now, we're gearing up for Game 4 of a maximum of 5, and Josh Utter-Leyton, who said, you could have killed me a turn earlier. Well, he killed you a turn later, but you're still dead. And it's 2-1 to Reid Duke, who is one game away from a date with Shahar Shenhar in the final. And that would mean the two youngest players of the 16 in the World Championships going toe-to-toe for $40,000 US in the best-of-5 final.
Also worth noting, these two players are, both representatives of the two major North American super teams.
Yeah.
Reid Duke has quickly been taken up as an oath brother in the Star City Black team, and Josh Utter-Leyton, obviously one of the stalwart playtesters for Channel Fireball. You guys lock him in a room with a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, and 12 hours to test the format, right?
So he can make a Boros deck that only he plays. But
Bitter much?
no, I was happy with how that Pro Tour went.
So, Josh, once again, of course, will be on the play. And now we get into the business of mulligans. Remember, the last time we got here with Josh on the play, we saw Reid, and that's his hand you're looking at there. He had to mulligan repeatedly all the way down to 4. You see Hyena Number, Rest in Peace, Unflinching Courage. There's a Horizon Canopy there. That's the first 4. He could do
Looks
some
like
more
a Beta
land.
Forest.
Well, Reid is a classy guy, so I'm not surprised at the Beta Forest. But unless the couple cards we can't see involve some creatures with hexproof, this is one of those hands that Reid might think about mulliganing.
That's Josh with Deathrite Shaman. He's got a Thoughtseize there, Dark Confident nearest the camera. And double Deathrite, in fact. And away we go with Reid deciding, nope, can't keep those.
And even though there have been a lot of mulligans in this match, I would expect to see many, many more mulligans in this match than, say, the two blue-red decks we saw face off earlier. Both decks are trying to do a very specific, very fast thing. Josh is mainly to stop Reid. And if they don't have the cards they need in their opening hand, there's really no advantage to trying to draw out of it. That's just not how this kind of matchup plays out.
It's also, when you're as good as either of these players are, any time that you cede the advantage to the point where you're just saying, well, okay, my hand isn't beating yours, so let's see if yours is beating mine. Oh, it is, thanks for playing. That's,
you're assuming your opponent is mulliganing well and
right.
Yeah.
Going to execute on their plan.
Yeah, and as you can see, as both players have mulligan fairly aggressively, Reid in particular, that does mean that when he hits, I mean, you've got to be prepared for the same kind of hand you would in close to a normal hand. I mean, even though Reid had, did mulligan, that was still a reasonably close game earlier. He was a draw step or two away from having what would effectively be a 7-card hand once he plays out all his cards.
Again, a banterless match.
Yeah, again, not surprising. I would not expect it otherwise.
I think you get the idea, though, the impression that if players aren't talking, that maybe there's that it's hostile. It's not. They're both very friendly, very polite players. They're just absolutely focused on the task at hand.
I would be very surprised if the top 4 of this tournament didn't go out for dinner tonight and have a fine time regardless of who beat who and what happened in the matches.
So 4 of them, 3 of us, and competition for who gets to draft as the 8th.
Just seeing Hyena Umbra, Horizon Canopy, and Glade Cover Scout means I don't think Reid wants to mulligan this hand.
Yeah, he can't walk away from something like that as a start, surely. And we are away with Josh Utter-Leyton, and he's going to see exactly what he's up against because it's the turn 1 Thoughtseize that we knew was coming, and it isn't just that Glade Cover Scout that we mentioned, because there's a Core Spirit Dancer once again.
And Josh Hayne is vulnerable to, well, basically all of that. He does have the turn 1 Thoughtseize, which is good disruption, but other than that, he doesn't have a ton of answers to what Reid's doing.
And what's the pick here? Do you take the enchantment? You have to take the hexproof guy, I would assume.
I feel like the hexproof creature is what Josh is going to be leaning towards, but I could see taking the enchantment. I think the Core Spirit Dancer is the one that has the most potential for explosive growth, as it were. Whereas if you take any of the other cards, if you take the Core Spirit Dancer, Reid does need to draw like a Daybreak Coronet or a Rancor to really go off. Once again, it looks like the ley line is just coming up slightly too short here.
Yes, that is not a card that has shined for Reid.
Leyline of tardiness.
Yeah. Leylines do present an interesting sub-game of, is this my opening hand? This game will play out dramatically differently if it is. The Twilight Mire for Josh did allow him to play a turn 2 Dark Confidant, which is something he's no doubt happy about.
2. 14.
There's the essential fetch land.
Yeah,
That's the first time we've seen Dark Confidant do anything other than get trampled under a bus so far in this match.
Yeah.
Actual card for Josh.
the ever-present Dryad Arbor showing up in the disguised as a misty rainforest. Reid has the opportunity to trade for Dark Confidant here, or at least try to.
16, 14.
I think the risk of getting dismembered is probably too high. If he knew he could trade for Dark Confidant 100%, he might choose to do that. But given that Josh could cast Dismember, it does mean that he doesn't really want to just go for that and end up getting stone rained for basically no cost to Josh, just a little bit of life. It's hands like this where the horizon canopies really come into play. Reid has drawn multiple of them, and he has, a total of way too many lands, but the horizon canopies do give him at least options, even though it does cost, a good amount of time and land drops.
Right, he has to take a turn.
He has to take a turn, miss his land drop essentially, and pay a mana, so it is not without cost, but the benefit is certainly there, and he, again, was very happy with having the card in his deck.
Reid Duke 1 game away from the final.
I mean, he also is thinking about that Leyline of Sanctity.
Yeah, and if he could get to 4 mana, playing Leyline would protect him from a lot of Josh's cards, mostly the Liliana, because at this point, I don't think Josh's hand disruption is going to play a huge part in this game. It's unlikely that Reid draws a card and doesn't just cast it, but Josh could certainly draw Liliana, and that would be something Reid would want to avoid.
You draw Garrick there?
As well as an Infest.
No, just sideboarded Invest, everything gets -2/-2.
He didn't draw the Garrick. The Garrick came off the top of his deck and punched him thanks to Dark Confidant. Eric Froelich lost a game to David Ochoa in the World Championship by flipping Garrick when it was the only spell in his deck that could kill him and there was only one left. He was not pleased.
He had to know the luck-adjusted odds were not in his favor.
Yeah, that apparently was true. Minfest does not come without a cost here. Josh can get rid of the Glade Cover Scout before it gets any more auras, but that would involve picking up and putting into the graveyard every other creature he has in play.
Unancestral recalling himself.
Oh, that sounds terrible. Why would you do that?
Well, the problem is once Reid draws almost any other aura besides Rancor, the Infest no longer kills the Glade Cover Scout. So this puts Josh in a pretty tough spot. He would really have rather drawn Tarmogoyf than one of those Deathrite Shamans, maybe even rather than the Dark Confidant.
Looks like he's going to play Garrick.
Yeah, I think he knows that Reid doesn't have any auras in his hand, so it looks like he's just going to go with the, develop my board, make Garrick, and maybe at some point later go ahead and cast these Infest.
The well-known Amass Toughness plan.
Yeah, the well-known make a 2/2 wolf, next turn Infested away. Reid has a big decision here. He can give up on Dryad Arbor and give up on Leyline of Sanctity, but in exchange you get to see a card off Horizon Canopy and a card off his draw step to hit any number of powerful auras that would turn his game pretty firmly into his camp. Looks like that's the plan. He's just going to stick with the Leyline then, but he's, I guess, deciding that Dryad Arbor is not in his future. One reason to avoid Dryad Arbor here, of course, being that he has to get it now in order to tap it for mana, but Josh could still Infest. He's got the Deathrite Shamans untapped. Or rather, Dismember, he's got the Deathrite Shamans untapped for that.
Reid draws for the turn, still with that desperately irritating Leyline of Sanctity, which has, of course, done precisely nothing, not just this game, but the entire match.
Well, it's not done nothing. It's clogged Reid's draw steps and kept him from drawing other cards.
That's very true. I'm not looking at the upside.
Yeah.
Once a CF beer, always a CF beer.
Well, if Josh doesn't get him, Shahar will. Actually, that's probably not true. I don't think Shahar will get Reid.
although it was interesting. Reid dismantled Shahar when they played. But Shahar walked away from the match and he's like, "Oh, I definitely learned stuff in this match." Like, he felt like maybe he had sideboarded differently or didn't anticipate how Reid would sideboard, but felt like he got a lot of information out of that match about.
Yeah, Shahar's a smart kid. I definitely think that if he's played less than 5 matches against the Hexproof deck in testing, Then he plays against Reid in the tournament. He will definitely get information out of it.
I think the Rest in Peace has caught him by surprise.
Yeah, that is a card that you wouldn't really expect necessarily to come in, but make a lot of sense once they do.
I'll remove your land for a black.
Although that Leyline of Sanctity is now finally in play, remember that the Deathrite Shaman draining ability will still happen because it says each opponent. So the way that works. Josh falls to 8 via Thoughtseize.
Drawing immediately a card that you can't cast due to Leyline, unless he wants to cast it on himself.
Lava darts himself.
Where was Lava Dart from? I don't remember that.
That was the second Odyssey set.
So, oh, okay.
To Torment, I guess. I believe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Could have been in the third.
Is it time for the little village that could yet?
It might be time to infest and then attack with Treetop Village. Josh is currently not getting damage to it. I think he's going to attack with Treetop Village this turn, almost regardless of what his play does end up being. But I would not be surprised if he considered pulling the trigger on infest. He could also just attack with the Treetop and the Wolves and the Dark Confidant and just see what Reid does. The Deathrite Shaman's also being nearly out of gas here does impact his decision as well.
Could send everybody.
He could actually just attack with everything. I think in a lot of worlds, Josh does want to cast Infest this turn, though, just to prevent Reid from just drawing an aura and just going off immediately. So I think he's just weighing the pros and cons of, basically dumping his board into the graveyard. But he does get to make a wolf. He does have a Treetop Village, and it doesn't change the clock all that much if Reid's eating a 2/2 a turn anyway with his Gladecover Scout.
All things Josh is considering here. Starts lining them up.
It's also hard to tell what Reid would block because, Dark Confidant could threaten Josh's life total as well. Reid might actually let that one go by. The converted mana cost of Josh's deck is low enough, though, that Dark Confidant, you don't really have a huge expectation of it killing you, but as we've seen in the past, that doesn't always matter. Josh also might want to leave a Deathrite Shaman back in order to have the 6th land to cast Infest and activate Treetop in the same turn if casting Infest is part of his plan.
I think you are done.
So if he leaves the Deathrite Shaman back, I think that signifies that he's casting Infest this turn. I like casting the Infest this turn just because Reid's one card away from essentially killing you because with the Leyline you can't even draw Liliana to get out of it. So if you're Josh, you have to think that sitting Reid back basically to square 0 is important.
So he blocks the wolf.
Potentially letting Dark Confidant live for the exact reason mentioned earlier.
Even if the Dark Confidant doesn't kill it, maybe cuts Josh off from some additional cards, like maybe a Dismember.
Yeah, it could make Dismember harder to cast, which is very relevant. Doesn't cut off Thoughtseize anymore because Reid's already done that with his Leyline.
Block wolf. Sure. Take 6, I'm at 6.
So half of Reid's remaining 12 life is gone. He's down to 6.
Josh getting some card advantage here.
Infest. Everything just got -2, -2. Now
Fresh
here
wolf.
comes a wolf.
And the Treetop Village, of course, survives that to attack another day.
So threatening, not quite lethal, but a lot of pressure. And Reid's deck, if he doesn't have Daybreak Coronet, doesn't actually do all that well defensively. All the rankers in the world won't save you if you're getting attacked and dying.
Speak of the devil, he drew the, second enchantment there.
And it was the second enchantment, not just a second enchantment. So
There it is.
Reid would have won the game had he been able to cast the Daybreak Coronet on his Gladecover Scout.
Very, very small margins.
Reid's got another turn here. I mean, he's got the Daybreak Coronet in hand, so any other cheap aura besides Daybreak Coronet, and he gets to assemble, well, a symbol of Voltron that may not work anymore.
Indeed. Josh has drawn Abrupt Decay. In.
All right, I'll take it.
Take it, I'll go to 1. So back we go to Reid Duke, looking at a Glade Cover Scout, a Leyline of Sanctity that has not done a lot for him. He has a Daybreak Coronet.
And we get to see a little bit of false hope here, unfortunately, for Reid.
Yeah. Stick this on, show you the Abrupt Decay. In response to the Coronet is the question.
Though it doesn't actually matter if the Coronet's enchanting a creature without an enchantment, it'll still fall off.
It just goes away.
So Josh could even use it as a trick. Not that he needs to here, he's got just lethal on the board.
And big round of applause for the forcing of Game 5. You see, the truth is, boys and girls at home, you want to be playing blue, white, red flash mirrors, because they're done in no time.
Desperate times, right?
Desperate times, right, says Reid.
Talking about the infest that
Yeah.
recorded, Josh. It's like a Bone Splinters that the requirement is sacrifice all your creatures.
But interestingly, I'm really intrigued by this because you see these two who they're on this empty floor and you could feel the tension. We listen to this in the booth on headphones, and so we get a very clear audio signal from the floor. And you just feel that tension growing and growing and growing, and the silence. And I think they just kind of both, almost by common consent, went, I need to hear another human voice before they gear up for Game 5, because you really can cut the tension with a knife.
It's also hard to infest away your entire board to kill one creature and not laugh about it.
And you can see the facade crack a little as they, prove that they're actually having a good time here, even though they're all business while they're playing.
Well, we're heading to Game 5, and Planeswalkers, of course, are incredibly powerful within the game of Magic, pretty much regardless of the format. Josh Utter-Leyton, who you see there, has one that can deal with a gigantic creature from Reid if he gets the chance, and that's Liliana of the Veil. Why don't we take a look at her, go behind the scenes with Liliana of the Veil. There you see her.
I think very fitting that we're looking at this while talking about Reid Duke. Reid really put this card on the map in my book for the Modern Jund list at the Mox when you were in the top 8 of Worlds in San Francisco.
Oh, in 2011.
Yeah, in 2011, he was really he was cascading into it with Bloodbraid Alpha. It was a very different looking Jund list than what we have now in Modern.
Yeah, it was slightly before Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, and before Deathrite Shaman, but this card has become a fixture in both Standard and Modern Jund lists.
Yeah, it delivers a lot of power for only 3 mana and threatens not only your opponent's hand, but also their board. So it has a lot of crossover. It works in a lot of different matchups.
Right, and you see, good in both the possible decks that Josh could face. Good against Hexproof, good at emptying players' hands in a control matchup.
I mean, it's his best card against Hexproof, assuming Leyline's not in play, and it's also one of his best cards. Maybe not the best card, but one of his best cards against Blue or Red. Chahar's list is a little good at attacking it with Vendilion Click and Restoration Angel, but imagine Ben made the finals, Liliana would have been very, very important there.
Yeah, and this has been in a number of Grand Prix winning decks. I believe in a number of different formats.
Yeah, and especially once we, talk about Deathrite Shaman, once that came out, that's a natural pair with Liliana, because a turn 2 Liliana, if you play on the play a turn on Deathrite, your opponent plays a 1-drop, and you have turn 2 Liliana destroy your 1-drop, that's really hard to recover from.
So let's focus in on this final match. We've seen quite a lot of mulligans and a lot of strategic mulliganing as we try and work out what kind of hands the players want to sculpt. Reid is on the play here in Game 5. So it's pretty clear-cut what he wants to do. He wants lots of nice auras. He wants at least, ideally, 2 creatures so that if there's a Liliana, he can only have to sacrifice one of them and go with as many creatures over the first few turns as he can. But what about Josh on the other side? Where does he look to go on the draw?
He's looking for a hand without Leyline of Sanctity.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. His first priority is that Reid not have Leyline. If Reid doesn't have Leyline, they get to play a game. If Reid has Leyline, it's more on Reid than Josh at that point. Josh just has to spectate and hope Reid doesn't assemble his combo.
Reid's basically looking for Boggle, Rancor, Daybreak Coronet, Leyline of Sanctity, and a couple of lands.
Yeah, that hand is almost unbeatable, just by itself.
The thing is, I don't want to pick a fight with you, but he can't do anything about that. It's nothing to do with him whether Reid has a Leyline of Sanctity or not. He has to look at whatever the 7 cards are that he's got and work on that basis, right?
Oh no, of course, he wants like a Tarmogoyf, a Thoughtseize, and a Liliana, something.
Okay.
combination.
Maybe a Deathrite Shaman in there too.
Yeah.
But the overlying point is that Reid's Leyline can actually shut off most of Josh's avenues to victory.
Sure.
So Josh has to pretend the card doesn't exist
Yeah.
and just keep his hand, kind of irrespective of that.
Right.
A perfectly, snap-keepable hand just becomes a double or triple mulligan in the face of a Leyline of Sanctity.
Yeah, I'm certainly not debating the efficacy of Leyline of Sanctity. It's more when we get a look at Josh's opening hand here, it's like, what's he going to do here with that? And then we wait to find out the drama of, is there a face-down card? Incidentally, someone said, would you ever bluff? If you're on the play, on Twitter, someone asked, would you bluff the face-down card? Just, you sort of set it aside and say, I'm going to keep, and imply that you had... I mean, does that do anything ever?
I think at this level, you just need to look at Shahar Shenhar consulting the Oracle decks of Thundermoor Hellkite and, multiple Hall of Famers screaming
Yeah.
at Shahar that
I
was...
know what you've got.
I told Brian when we had a little break in between the two matches, I walked out and all Channel Fireballs, they're just laughing at Charge. It's like, come on, man! When you picked up that iPad, every single person in the building knew you had Thundermaw.
Boom. Leyline of Sanctity. It's been rubbish in this match so far.
Well, this is the hand. This is the hand Reid has wanted.
And now he has one. And he's keeping. And Josh Utter-Leyton says keep as well. And there it is. A nod from Josh Utter-Leyton. Leyline, land, Glade Cover Scout. Josh lays Treetop Village, passes the turn. That Leyline has been abysmal in this match, boys and girls. I can't stress enough how terrible it's been.
Reid's like, it took you long enough.
Yeah.
Well, it's there when it counts.
But this is where it counts because the winner of this game advances to the World Championship final against Shahar Shenhar.
There is a Liliana in Josh's hand.
Mm-hmm.
So now Josh really just needs a Maelstrom Pulse. That's his best draw here.
But this is not what Reid wants to do, attacking for 1.
Well, Reid actually has it all. As it turns out, he's got an Ethereal Armor and a Daybreak Coronet and a 3rd land, so he's just setting up the full combo.
So I've got a bit of time, make the Spirit Dancer, and then let's go to town.
Yeah, if the Spirit Dancer sticks, great. If not, he still has a lot of what he needs.
Right, he doesn't get to Ancestral himself while making like an 8/8 or something Glade Cover Scout.
Yeah, so Deathmark takes out the core Spirit Dancer, so that puts Reid back into a little bit of thought mode because he is so far ahead at the start of this deciding game because of that Leyline of Sanctity. And I guess that's why you keep on playing it, even when it clogs up your nonsense draws later in the game, does nothing, because you get games like this where you just go, pow, and now what?
Josh really looking to draw Abrupt Decay here or Maelstrom Pulse. Abrupt Decay, if Reid does go for the Armor plus Coronet, as we saw before, it can knock off both of them at once. I think I heard the words Daybreak Coronet in the background.
There is an Ethereal Armor. It goes onto the Glade Cover Scout.
Oh, is he going to draw a card here instead of playing the Daybreak Coronet?
No, I think what Reid actually is doing is he's playing around Abrupt Decay by waiting till he can play both Daybreak Coronets, hopefully while Josh has tapped out. I could see him drawing a card, but it makes more sense to me to hope for a 4th land and then play Daybreak Coronet. I do think he's going to end up playing the Coronet once Tarmogoyf comes out, though, rather than just not attacking.
So there is Tarmogoyf from Josh Utter-Leyton. You've got a Deathmark and you've got a core Spirit Dancer in the graveyards. So your Tarmogoyf right now is a 2/3.
If he could play both Coronets next turn, that would be a +9/+9. That would be a 10/10.
Yeah, he would end up with a 10/10 Scout.
Actually,
and then he got there with the Horizon Canopy.
Actually, an 11/11 because that
Oh, the Leyline.
that Leyline counts.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. You brought it up as a potential advantage.
Daybreak. Daybreak is that.
So +3, +3, +4.
Yep. Plus 10. That's 11. Oh, boy.
Josh is basically down to drawing Maelstrom Pulse and targeting Daybreak Coronet here.
Which would still leave him with
Leave him with
+2/+2 on the
a 3/3 first striking, Glade Cover Scout with outs to draw anything else and just, take it from there. But step one is draw Maelstrom Pulse.
We've identified the first step.
As long as you know the first step, you can start on the path.
Yeah. But it looks like the path that Josh Utter-Leyton is on does not currently lead to the World Championship final. The Player of the Year.
Josh had no chump block there.
No,
He's not dead, so...
You can't block there. You need to keep the Tarmogoyf around. In case you do draw the Pulse, you need to be able to win afterwards.
And also keep the Glade Cover Scout back
Right.
for a turn. So in this case, Abrupt Decaying the Ethereal Armor would not make the Daybreak Coronets fall off.
No, because they kind of look at each other and say, yeah, this is a cool place to be.
Let's see what Josh can do. We've seen so many incredible turnarounds today. He draws a Treetop Village.
This is the Liliana concede.
There's Liliana.
Josh taking a page out of Reid Duke's book and
Pass the turn.
maybe Reid will attack the Liliana.
Well, Reid's drawn a land, so that's not going to give him lots more strategic options.
He probably will cycle a land here.
Yeah, I mean, Reid being Reid, he's not one to leave any stone unturned.
I mean, every time I've seen him cycle one of those, he draws a Rancor.
Well, we'll find out in a second.
Reid just going through the final moments.
38.
38.
All right.
And here's a Bogle. Here we go.
He knows his opponent doesn't have Barter in blood.
The second Bogle,
Yeah.
as well as the Dryad Arbor, means that
Josh draws.
a Pulse plus Liliana sacrifice still doesn't do it.
And there's a little sigh from Josh Utter-Leyton, just
Drew an
picks up
fast.
in the headphones.
He has some treetop villages. He's not dead yet. It's just at this point, it's getting to the. He's not. I don't really see how he climbs out of this hole because at the very worst, Reid's left with a 3/3 first striker with Josh at 4, maybe falling to 3 off just the Bogle pecking in, maybe to 2 off a Dryad Arbor as well if Reid really wants to, assemble a crack squad of 1/1s.
Crack squad. God help us. Tick up. Discard. Go.
This card I can't cast.
He could ultimate. I mean, ultimating Liliana if he gets to that point is interesting. Leads to some interesting splits with auras involved, but I find it hard to believe Josh would survive to that point.
Yeah.
38-4.
38-4. Reid confirms. Reid is prepared to invest 1/38 of his life total.
Yeah, I think Reid is going on the beatdown plan here.
Boggle beatdown.
Yeah.
Dryad Arbor getting in there.
I mean, I think Reid really just does have all of Josh's outs covered at this point. Josh doesn't have quite enough mana or life or creatures in order to kind of assemble the 2 or 3 card combination he really needs to beat this start.
He's going to start dust balling those
Treetop villages.
every turn.
It's been a fantastic run for Josh Utter-Leyton. He began 1 and 2 off what seemed a terrific red-white deck all the way back in Modern Masters Draft on Wednesday. But now, as you see that Hyena Umbra getting ready to enter play, all the lives are starting to run out for your 2012-2013 Player of the Year. Reid draws off Horizon Canopy. Continues to be measured, relentless, and as far as we can tell, quite literally right now, unstoppable.
Trying to figure out what he can lose to.
Yeah, and Reid's very good at that, and I think he's going to think for a while. He's going to triple check that work because he wants to make the finals of the World Championship. He's going to conclude that he's probably not much he can lose to. Granted, Reid doesn't know Josh's hand. For all he knows, Josh's hand has multiple abrupt decays. That's the sort of thing he has to concern himself with. The rest of us know a little bit more than that, unfortunately, for Josh.
And you were right. It's the complete army that go in. These three. Josh will go make my guy. Treetop Village gets in the way of Gigantinormous Man.
You're going to take 3. I'm going to gain 12.
So you take 3, I gain 12. That seems remarkably fair. 49 to 1.
Four outer and a 2-outer.
There's a
And you have nothing.
4-outer and a 2-outer, says Josh. He looks. Is that either of them? Those cards about to drop to the table. And we'll see a handshake, I wonder. There it is. Reid Duke, by 3 games to 2, defeats the player of the year, Josh Utter-Leyton. Huge applause. And yeah, he looks just like he's played a bit of kitchen table magic with some friends, which on one level is actually true. And he advances to the World Championship final against Shahar Shenhar, which is going to be outstanding entertainment. And it turns out that after 71 teams and 12 rounds of the World Championship and 12 more rounds of that, and then a quarters and a semi, and having a team or champion, and then a semi, and then a semi, I thought we'd just play one more match. Can we just get through one more together? I think we can do that.
Absolutely. This has been riveting magic all day for me.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And as long as I'm free to go after this match, I'm perfectly willing to stay.
Okay.
By the way, you said kitchen table magic. Maybe if you're playing in some shady back alley kitchen where you're playing magic for finger ante. That Reid looked, like all the air went out of him after that match. That was not kitchen table magic he was playing.
Okay, that's interesting.
Kitchen table with a machete.
Yeah, at the ready. All right. So, Reid Duke is through 3 to 2. Now, remind us, what does Shahar think of that?
I mean, Shahar would rather play against Josh by a pretty significant margin.
All right.
Which, when you're saying play against Josh.
Yeah, it's not like he has great options here, but Reid is the matchup he wanted to play the least of the 4 people.
That
All
matchup's
right.
bad for me. I'd rather play the player of the year.
Well, why don't we hear from the man who has defeated the player of the year? Reid Duke is on the floor with our own Sheldon Menery.
Hey everybody, Sheldon Menery down in the feature match area with Reid Duke. First thing, Leyline of Sanctity. It looked a little less than inspiring in the previous games, but was an MVP in that game. Did you ever consider siding it out?
No, I mean, it's, if possible, even more important when I'm on the draw, since I can protect my turn 1 creature from Josh's Inquisition or Thoughtseize. But in reality, Liliana of the Veil is the best card against me with both the Edict, the Edict effect mostly. So, Leyline is just a card I want every single game, almost no matter what. It does look a little bit embarrassing when I draw it as like my second draw step and can't cast it, but just that chance of having it in the opening hand is worth keeping them all in.
All right, so let's compare your experience last year at this event to your experience this year at this event.
Yeah, well, I'm still playing, first of all, but last year I was out of the running, before even the first day had ended, and all I wanted to do was come back and play again this year. It's such a great tournament, for so many reasons. But the fact that this year I get to play those extra 2 matches and still have a shot at the title, it means everything.
All right, we're going to see him in the finals. Good luck. I'm Sheldon Menery. Back to the booth.
Okay, Brian David Marshall, I'm not going to lie. You're absolutely right, and I was completely wrong. That is a man who has gone through the mill there. You are spot on.
And
Well
I
done.
got a little something in my eye here.
Yes.
Dusty in the booth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair play to you. Spot on.
So that was great. Just great to hear from Reid. And what a great story. I mean, last place last year, and I think felt somewhat, harshly judged for that, right? I mean, it's 16 of the best players in the world, but I mean, it was just like, wow, I, put myself up against the game's best, and I came up woefully lacking.
Yeah, I mean, someone has to finish last, and certainly no one's going to tell Martin Yuza that because he finished last here, he's worse than the other 15 players. That's just not true.
But Martin certainly felt that way
He was
at some point this weekend.
He was not happy with his performance and how he played, and I think that will hopefully light the same fire under him that it apparently lit under Reid's.
Multiple people congratulated him on his top 4 finish at this event.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Reid, we spoke to him on the eve of last year at the Players' Championship, and he said, look, my goal here is not to embarrass myself. I want to not be humiliated. And in the end, he kind of was, and he felt that way. And this year, when you did exactly the same question the night before, he's like, yeah, well, I kind of belong here, and I'm ready to play. And I don't think he would have honestly said, I expect to win. But certainly he felt that he was well in the mix in the middle of the crowd in much the same way as when you talk to David or Josh, they would say, yep, well, there are great players here, but, I've got a chance and I'm in the middle of the pack somewhere for sure. And that made all the difference in the world to him. So we have Reid Duke advancing to the final against Shahar Shenhar. Brilliant matchup coming your way. You're going to see more of the Bogles and the ley lines. And, will we see the ley lines again?
Probably not the ley lines.
Oh, so that was its last chance to put in a decent appearance.
And it did in spades.
It's like it's now or never.
And it was now for Reid Duke. Congratulations to him. The floor is empty. Reid Duke is going to be given a few minutes just to calm down. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to cross to the news desk. It's Zach Hill and first, Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hello and welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe with Zach Hill. So Reid Duke on his road to redemption. He's one step away.
And Reid Duke and Slippery Bogle.
Yeah, now let's take a look at the bracket here. We've got just a quick update. You guys saw a bunch of this earlier today, but Reid Duke on the top there, defeating Player of the Year Josh Utter-Leyton. Also on the bottom, Shahar Shenhar and Ben Stark fighting it out with Shahar as the winner. So that sets up our finals here. And I mean, as you can see on the graphic, they're really tough top 4 here of the 16 players. I mean, these are definitely 4 of the best. And let's take a look at Shahar. He's Shahar Shenhar, only 19 years old, and he's already a 3-time Grand Prix champion. He doesn't hit any Pro Tour top 8s yet, but I think that it's probably just a matter of time as long as he keeps playing at this level.
And the guy has earned 112 pro points before he turns 20.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an utterly unbelievable rate. I mean, and he hasn't been playing professionally for very many seasons. I think we're going to see a lot more out of him.
Yeah, he said, I've been playing for a really long time. I've been playing since I was 15. And when most people say that, you're like, oh, yeah, well. And he's just like, a few years ago. It's a really long time relative to his life. Yeah, that's right. So why don't you talk a little bit about what Shahar's playing, what the game plan is for his deck?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, he's playing a blue, white, red flash deck. It's sort of hybrid, like fairies. It can be pretty aggressive if it gets the right draw. Early Vendilion click into bolts and helix, or it can play the long game with Cryptic Command and Sphinx's Revelation. In terms of how he wants to play this matchup, though, he is not going to be in good shape. His deck are based around trading with creatures and trading up with value. He's got a lot of counter spells. He's got a lot of spot removal, Path to Exile, Electrolyze, Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix. Very few of those cards do anything against Reid. Now, he's got some counter spells, he's got some bounce, and those are going to be useful for him. After board, he gets Pyroclasm, but in general, not a lot of ways to interact with a hexproof creature.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're going to see, and we're going to talk about this matchup, but some of those cards have a very short window to be good versus Reid Duke, and after that, they're completely useless.
Yeah, exactly.
Pyroclasm came up. Now, let's take a look at Reid. We've been talking a lot about Reid this weekend. They were just talking about it in the booth as well, Zach, about, he had a disappointing for him performance last year at the World Championship, and he's used it as a motivator, and he's parlayed that from not only the last few matches of the World Championship into a platinum season, and now he's here in the finals.
Well, yeah, and definitely let's not underestimate kind of what that means. Like, it's easy to hear the story and be like, oh, okay, comeback, but it wasn't as though Reid got, 16th place on tiebreakers last year. I mean, he really crashed and burned, and I think that served to kind of light a fire in it.
Yeah,
and
it seemed like it did.
For him to deliver as decisive a performance as he has this weekend is really quite unbelievable.
It really is. You know, you and I were there in Seattle for the World Championship last year, and I mean, you could see it in his face. Like, I talked to him afterwards, just kind of patted him on the back, and he was like, okay. And, you know, we kind of had a thing that we showed on coverage where he started to write down a lot of the mistakes that he had made and a lot of the things that he wanted to work on. And I mean, you know, it's really, the thing that actually fascinates me about this story is that we play Magic. If you play tournament Magic, it's a pretty high variance game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the best players in the world win around 60% of their matches. It's not like, you know, you expect to win every tournament. Now, he had a particularly tough run on this tournament, but there's a lot that could set that up that doesn't relate to his play skill or his preparedness, yet even if that wasn't the case, it might have been a blessing in disguise, since now all of a sudden he's used it as this sort of catapult, and he turned it, like I said, into a platinum season, into a berth here in the World Championship, and now he's in a really good position going into the finals. I wanted to talk to you about that a bit, Zach. Let's talk about the matchup. How does this? How do you see the matchup?
I mean, not to.
Oh, and tell us a little about Reid's deck. I forgot.
Right, well, of course. So Reid's deck, as we just saw, is a green-white deck based around hexproof creatures, Glade Cover Scout, Slippery Bogle. He's also got Core Spirit Dancer to draw himself a ton of cards.
Very fun deck.
Yeah.
You were saying you really respected, but you were saying you really respected his choice here.
Yeah, well, I mean, because Reid is not trying to prove how smart he is and how many interactions he can discover. He's trying to defeat his opponents, which I have a lot of respect for.
Yes.
He realizes a lot of people are coming in here. They're going to play decks based around, you know, value creatures, going to try to bullet each other. He's going to say, look, I'm not playing the same game that you're playing. I'm going to play a creature that you can't deal with. I'm going to make it huge. I'm going to make you unable to race it, and I'm going to beat you with it.
Right.
And you know, so Reid's playing a high variance deck, as we saw. He mulliganed to 4 one time, and it's not as though he didn't have lands and spells ever. You know, the deck needs to assemble a particular combination of cards, but when it does, it's very hard to defeat if you can't interact with it on your terms.
Now, interestingly, we saw in the last round he played against Josh Utter-Leyton, who was playing Boltless Jund, just the green-black deck. And that actually had a reasonable amount of tools to interact with the things Reids were doing.
Yeah, it had Maelstrom Pulse, it had Abrupt Decay, it had
the number one, Liliana, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as we saw, and I think it was game 4, but I mean, had any of Reid's plays been sequenced any differently, the game would have gone very differently. So, I mean, there are a limited number of possible interactions, but there's a lot of playing to your outs that went on in that matchup. It was really very impressive to watch.
I thought it was too, and one of the key things that I see here is, so he just defeated Josh. Now, it did take him the full 5 games to do it, make no mistake, but Josh had, like you just mentioned, a bunch of tools that could either hit the enchantments or edict effects, as we call them, making your opponent sacrifice a creature from Liliana of the Veil. Shahar doesn't have any of those things.
No, he doesn't. If you looked at Shahar's semifinals opponent, Ben Stark, Ben had Hallowed Burial, Ben had Wear and Tear, Ben had a lot more tools with which to deal with this. Shahar really has a pair of Pyroclasms and some counter magic, and that's basically it. Now, we can't understate the impact that has. Spell Snare, extremely effective against Daybreak Coronet, one of the most powerful cards in the deck, as well as Core Spirit Dancer. With all the spot removal Shahar has, Spirit Dancer not really a huge problem. But what Shahar is going to have to do is to try and counter all of the enchantments that make the hexproof creatures good. Because, of course, he's not going to lose to 1 mana, 1/1 no ability. He's going to lose to the enchantments that get put on it.
That's right. And there's a big discrepancy here, because most of the enchantments cost 1 mana.
Right.
And most of Shahar's counter spells costs more than that.
That's true. On the other hand, I feel like it's a little bit like Affinity, and that if you can deal with Affinity's Cranial Plating, Arcbound Ravager, or to a lesser extent Steel Overseer, you can usually handle the rest of what the deck has to offer. I feel like if you can deal with Reid's Unflinching Courage, Ethereal Armor, and of course Daybreak Coronet, you can beat a couple of Umbras and a Rancor, or you can at least race it, or at least it's a game of Magic. So I feel like Shahar has the tools to contain some of those, but as you say, he's going to have a very limited window in which to do so.
Yeah, now a few of the cards out of the sideboard that Shahar has here are interesting. The first one that you just mentioned is Pyroclasm.
Right.
There's that window, but as we know, Reid will have this list. He will know what's coming, and he can simply wait. You do not have to turn 1 against Shahar here. He needs to assemble the Voltron, as we've been saying, where he has a hexproof plus a few things to get it out of range of things like Pyroclasm. Now, the other card, though, Supreme Verdict.
Supreme Verdict obviously doesn't target, so it's able to get around the hexproof. On the other end, that's not really what you want to be doing against Hyena Umbra and Spider Umbra.
That's the problem.
But on the other end, Reid's not going to have an Umbra all the time. He might want to side some of them out. I believe he sided out some Spider Umbras against Josh Utter-Leyton. So at the very least, it's a constraint that Reid has to pay attention to.
Yeah, now, and it's interesting because Supreme Verdict can take care of everything else and in impressive fashion, and usually Shahar's deck can buy him enough time to do that. Now, let's take a look at the flip side of this coin. Does Shahar's deck have the tools needed to race? Let's say he's able to counter the Daybreak Coronet.
Right.
But maybe Reid does actually assemble a pretty reasonable creature. Are there draws where Shahar is going to be able to race that creature?
I think there are. I mean, if the creature doesn't have lifelink, he's going to be dealing damage in increments of 2 to 4 a turn. Shahar can also just block, again, if he's able to contain those enchantments. So, I mean, he's going to bring in Thundermaw Hellkite and the additional Vendilion Click. Vendilion Click can also stop Coronet and Unflinching Courage. Again, those are really what he has to focus on. So I believe between Vendilion Clicks, 3 copies, 2 Restoration Angel, 4 Snapcaster Mages, 2 Thundermaw Hellkites, Shahar can at least put a meaningful amount of pressure on Reid. He's just going to have to make sure not to tap out and let Reid resolve a lifelink aura, because once that happens, you are not winning any race. Shahar does have a kind of a Miser's engineered explosive to deal with any of this stuff once it hits the battlefield. That's not really a play he's going to be able to count on when he's racing in the air. I think he's going to want to stick a click as soon as he possibly can.
A Vendilion Click.
Yeah.
So the engineered explosives, though, really is a fantastic card here, right? This is where, if Shahar can run well and draw this multiple times, that could be the difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, explosives I think is the best possible card to have in this matchup.
It's just awesome.
Yeah, that you could at all reasonably include in your sideboard. I mean, I guess something like Paraceline would be great, but whatever, a Tempest of Light. But I mean, engineered explosives has broad applicability, and of all the cards that you could just put in a deck, it's among the best in this matchup.
Let's take a quick look at Reid Duke's sideboard now. Remember, this is a best of 5, so we're going to be seeing quite a few sideboarded games here. So Leyline of Sanctity in the last match was a huge deal. It was, if it was turn 0 from Reid, things looked really good from him. We saw him draw them a little bit later than turn 0, looked a lot worse. Is Leyline good against Shahar?
I don't think so. I think if you're Reid, you're not really too worried about getting burned out.
Or Vendilion Click or whatever.
I mean, it's nice against Vendilion Click, but I don't think it's worth going down a card to be able to not be Vendilion Clicked. And the things that it was good against Josh were Discard Spells and Liliana of the Veil, 2 of the most problematic cards. The Leyline doesn't deal with the counter magic that would kind of be serving the role of the discard spells.
Now, what about cards like Suppression Field? Is this, Rest in Peace? We heard. I think that Reid actually brought Rest in Peace in against a red, white, blue player in the Swiss portion or something. Is that something that we might see here?
Certainly, Rest in Peace is good against Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't really know. I mean, you can get one of Shahar's Thinks Twice. But he only plays 1 copy. I don't know that it would be worth it to me. But again, Reid's tested this a lot. It's hard for me to evaluate, not having played the amount of games that he has, how good a card like Spider Umbra, how good a card like Keen Sense is in this context. I mean, it might be that he wants to blank Spell Snares and brings out 2-mana card. I mean, I doubt it.
Sure.
But it's hard to see what the plan is. My intuition is that he would not bring in Rest in Peace, but it might be so good against Snapcaster that it's worth it.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty there. This is a complex matchup, and it's not something that you can just off the top of your head know every answer to. But I still get to throw you the questions anyway. Now, I do see Reid Duke has a couple of Dismember. I'm assuming here that that Reid Duke is the aggressor in this matchup, and I don't mean aggressor necessarily in the sense of like actual attacking. I just mean that he's the one who's trying to be proactive, where Shahar's trying to stop him and delay the game as long as possible. Are cards like Dismember cards that Reid Duke are going to be looking at out of the sideboard for the threats that Shahar can put forth?
I don't like Dismember as much as I like Path to Exile right now. We talked about the fact that Shahar is going to need to go on the offensive with things like Restoration Angel and Thundermaw Hellkite. I think Path is very good against those because it preserves preserves Reid's life total. I don't think you want to be taking 4 damage to dismember any of those cards because it kind of it basically races yourself for them.
Okay.
Remember, Shahar's deck has got a lot of burn in it. You're going to burn out
really
some
does.
of it. But I mean, I think you keep in some of it because you're going to want to kill Core Spirit Dance. You're going to want to kill Dryad Armor. So I can't imagine him taking out the full, 2 Lightning Helix and 4 Lightning Bolt. So dealing 4 to yourself to deal with one of these cards, I think is a lot less along the lines of what you want to do than pathing to exile one of these kinds of creatures.
Sure.
And I don't think you want to dilute your deck so much that you bring in 4 of these reactive cards.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the other cards I see for Shahar Shenhar here is he's got 2 Sphinx's Revelation. Now, in the standard decks that run Sphinx's Revelation, it's probably the most important card in the deck. Here in Modern, it takes a little bit more of a backseat because some of the matchups are so quick that you never really get a chance to get that huge revelation. But in Modern, if you do, it usually completely shuts the door on the game. Are the games going to go long enough for Sphinx's Revelation to be a factor for Shahar?
Are they going to go? It's hard to say. If things go according to Shahar's plan, they're going to go long. I think that Shahar wants to keep in Sphinx's Revelation because, again, if what you're doing is fighting counter wars over Daybreak, Coronet, and Unflinching Courage, and maybe trying to keep Ethereal Armor off if you can, what's going to happen is you're going to be getting dealt damage still in chunks of 2 and 4. And you're going to want to attack with Restoration Age. You're going to want to attack with Vendilion Click to put pressure on Reid not to draw more of these cards. And because of that, I think you're going to want Sphinx's Revelation just to gain like 3 or 4 life, pad your life total, get a turn ahead, and draw into your cards like Supreme Verdict, Engineered Explosives that you need to stabilize. And also, again, just so you don't die to like anemic creature beatdown.
Right.
That is going to be happening. We saw him getting in there with Dryad Arbor and Glade Cover Scout and everything like that. I would not disbelieve you if Shahar walked up to me right now and told me that's like totally wrong. No, this is too expensive. I'm siding it out. But my intuition would be to keep it in and cut stuff like just Shadow of Doubt. That isn't really doing just a whole lot beyond getting sack lands.
Let's take a look at Shahar Shenhar's sideboard here. We've got it up on the graphics for you guys here. Engineered Explosives. That is the card in this matchup. Unfortunately for Shahar, he's only packing 1 of them. Looking at the other cards, Dispel.
Probably not.
Celestial Purge. That doesn't really hit anything that's super important, right? Counterflux. Maybe he just wants more counters.
I could see bringing it in just to have a counter spell that interacts with the cards that you really care about. They're really high impact cards.
Yeah, and we talked about Supreme Verdict, Pyroclasm, Thundermaw, Hellkite, and Click. You're predicting those are going to come in just to try to give Shahar some more proactiveness. Now, you know what? They're ready. Yeah.
I'll have to see if all these predictions that I'm making are even reasonable.
Yeah. Hey, look, without having tested the heck out of the matchup, you did a pretty good job.
I didn't sleeve up any slippery bogles to bring to this tournament.
All right, so right now it's ready. It's the finals of the World Championship. After this next match, we will have a world champion. Rich, BDM, and Luis are waiting for us in the booth. Let's send it down there right now.